Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's episode 258 of the Audible Farm Podcast, and this episode is brought to you by the Fort Dodge Fine Arts Association. Go to www.fdfineartsassociation.org to find out more. Check out their podcast, FDT. They're coming up on 10 episodes. That's pretty cool. A lot of podcasts don't even make it that long, so congratulations. Well, it's coming up. So we'll see if they hit number 10. I'm pretty sure they will. And be sure to check out their website, community calendar, all sorts of good stuff. Social medias, there's a link to their website down below. This week is a solo episode. Wah, wah. I know what you're thinking. Oh, no, not another solo episode. But this one's going to be a little different. I'm not just reading an article and providing commentary to it this time. I'm going to go through a couple topics that I think are pretty near and dear to me. And these are things that I always try to take a little bit of pride on myself, or I try to be as introspective as possible and look inward on myself. But the two topics basically are just doing the right thing and being prepared, kind of at gigs and just in general. And the other one is just trying to avoid cliches and stereotypes and the just kind of those monikers that musicians have. And it's really thick in the guitar world. So I'm going to talk about that in this episode. So cue the music. Let's do it.
It's the Audible Farm Podcast with your host, Peter Stockdale.
All right. Okay. So this weekend I played a show and it was very hot, and just about everything that could have gone, I want to say awry. Nothing really went wrong, but anything that could have gone south, I mean, it was really close. It was so close to going that way. So basically, we played an outdoor gig. I played with Jesse Wilson, and there was an awning for us to play under. So it was going to be pretty good. It was nice and breezy. It was very warm, very sunny. And so we show up and it gets really windy, and the awning is just a kind of a tent around us. It's not going to stay. So it ends up going away before it gets broken, which is cool because I've seen tents break and they're expensive, and it just hurts me to see that happen to them. But yeah, so no shade. And this is one of those situations where it's I didn't prepare for this, and this is unfortunate on my part, and I'm always just I'm always prepared. I brought the right clothes, kind of, and I brought enough gear and everything. I thought, I had drinks but no cooler, so I bring a Gatorade out, and in 10 minutes it's 100 degrees, Gatorade, and it's all right, now it's disgusting, so I don't really want to drink it. But anyways, so that was kind of where I was at. Luckily Jesse brought a cooler, and so if I needed to stash a drink over there, I could have. But look, we were at a venue. They brought us, waters and everything too. So it was, everything worked out in that aspect. But I also was ignorant enough not to bring sunscreen. Playing out in the sun, and setting up for an hour before and tearing down for an hour afterwards, and you play for 3 hours, and it's, oh yeah, I probably should have brought sunscreen. I didn't think about it. I never did it. And that's something Jesse's always at shows. If we're playing outside, he's I have to have sunscreen. I've got it with me. I'm not going to be stronger than the sun. That's one thing you're never going to be stronger than, which is a great saying. So, and he's got a great point. So, kudos to him. He bailed me out with the sunscreen. He had the cooler. He had the sunscreen. Man, he was coming in clutch, and it's just those things where you're I thought of everything, but I guess not, and I try my best to always just be everything works. It's all here. I have everything I need. And if I don't have it, I can make do without it. But these are those situations where it's yeah, sunscreen came in handy because I used it, but there's small patches on my body that are still just really bright red. And it's pretty hilarious. It's not funny, whatever, but it's oops, I missed an elbow, and there's the inside of one ankle is way red, and the rest of me is just fine. So hats off to Jesse. I do look a little maybe redder on camera here, but coming in clutch, just bringing the stuff you need to bring to gigs, and that's what it comes down to, and It goes both ways, like he had lost one of the little socks for his microphone. And I had an extra one, so I just gave him my extra one, and it's playing out in the wind. You kind of need one, and so there's things that go both ways, but there is something you can't avoid, and that's just completely forgetting a piece of gear. It's happened. I see it happen sometimes online, and it's like, haha, kind of, it's just kind of like funny because, we've all been there sort of, but at the same time, you like, everybody kind of helps each other out. So, it usually works out. And so the funny ones are like, I think Scott Kirkhart might've mentioned it on a recent podcast or one of the ones he was on, but it's like, you got to bring a guitar. You can't just show up without a guitar. That's like the worst thing you can do. And it's funny because I've like heard a couple stories from people where like people didn't bring a guitar, or they like, I brought an electric and an acoustic and the acoustic case had nothing in it, or just like things like that. So, not bringing an instrument, I'm not going to out anybody, but I know there's people that are close to us that like have literally just forgotten some of the most important pieces of gear, and it happens, just try not to make a pattern out of it, I guess. But this weekend I had something kind of like that happen. I show up everywhere and I usually have two of everything. It doesn't matter what I'm doing. It's like, oh, if I need an amp, guess what? I usually have two, not always, but just bring a little combo amp or something with you to make do. If all else goes awry, you can just plug a guitar with one cable into this thing and noise will come out and you can save the day. You don't have all the fancy doodads. You don't have the pedal board and everything, but it'll work, and that's kind of the gist of why I do that, but I didn't bring a backup acoustic guitar to this show. And for whatever reason, my acoustic guitar was non-functional. I don't know why. I have not tried to like diagnose the problem and figure it out. But I mean, it's obvious. Oh, yes, I changed the battery. I know. It's like, oh, did you change the battery? That's the first. There's people listening and they're like, but yes, we tried different cables. We tried everything and it just didn't work. It was very bright out, so I couldn't tell if it was even like lighting up to let me know that there was anything happening. But it's like, did you change the battery again? Yeah, I tried 2 different batteries from 2 different packs and it just wasn't functioning. So, what do you do in that situation? That's a tough one, because I didn't have a backup. So is Jesse just going to have to go out in the sun by himself and just muscle his way through a Sunday gig when he's probably played 2 other gigs that weekend, which he would have done it. He's a trooper. He does that stuff. But it made me feel so bad. I was just like, I don't know what to do. Like the only other option I have is to put a microphone next to my guitar and just try that. And I can't move at all, and I got to be right there. And it would have worked, but holy smokes. I felt really bad, but lucky for me, Jesse brought a backup and I got to use his backup guitar. So that was really kind of cool, to get to play somebody else's instrument for a whole gig for 3 hours. By the first couple songs, you're like, this is weird. And then by the third set, you just kind of feel at home. And it's not, I know Jesse was giving me crap. It's like, this is coming home with me. This isn't yours. And I'm like, yeah, I know. But it was kind of nice. It's neat to play somebody else's instrument. My acoustic guitar is an economy guitar. I mean, it looks nice. It's a nice guitar, but it's made to be played, and it's made to be played at shows. And it's not something that you have to take really, really good care of. And it will work. It's just like a workhorse economy instrument. It's not cheap, but it's not anything that you really need to try to take care of. It's a difference between like you have a car that drives around and it gets you from A to B. It's not a piece of junk, but it's not like it's, whatever, a Ferrari or something. So you don't really have to do any high-end maintenance on it, but it's just, it does what it's supposed to. So I have one of those and it does the job, but it's fun playing other people's instruments when somebody has one that's like literally just, if you put the guitar, how much guitar stuff it costs, like into increments, and say you put like 5 different tiers of guitar prices. Mine's probably like level 2. It's right at the bottom of level 2, and you can go like just to level 3, like just at the very bottom or the very top of level 2 and the very bottom of level 3. That's a lot of wiggle room in that area. So just going up one tier, and that's pretty much what it was. And it was a nice nice guitar to play. So it was kind of fun to like I said, get out there and play somebody else's. It's almost like driving someone else's car. If you have a car that's well loved and it works, but then somebody's like, try driving this nice car, and you're like, ooh, this is pretty nice, And so it was kind of fun to go out there and play somebody else's instrument, and it was nice knowing the show was going to go on. We complimented each other well enough, like, so providing other pieces of gear to one another. But at the same time, I felt so bad for not bringing all the gear. And so that was basically that story, generally speaking, propelled like what I wanted to talk about on this podcast. And so that was this last weekend. So I just wrote down some like hot points. Like you got to be prepared. This comes down to doing what I call doing the right thing, or doing the right thing by the person who is paying you to be there, which be that the venue, or be that the person who's heading the band and you are a hired gun, or be that you guys as a band, or someone as a solo artist, and all this stuff. Again, this all has caveats. If this isn't how you want to run your band, then don't do it. I don't know. This is just based on like how I feel, I guess. So if you feel the same way, let me know. And if you don't, light me up in the comments. Let me know what you think. But yeah, you got to be prepared for these shows. There's too many shows I've been to where somebody forgot like a whole cable, or like they brought an amp but they didn't have the power cord for it, or just like weird stuff. And I know sometimes things happen, and if you're playing a lot of shows, maybe you left one somewhere, or something. There's something always happens, but I'm usually the person who's prepared with that situation. I've always had like a robust cable bag, bag full of cables and stuff. Some of that came down to like the first cable bag I ever had was like an old piece of airplane luggage that somebody had, and it was like one of those, you click it out and it has the top on it and it rolls, and you have to tilt it. Not like the nice new ones that can all sit on all four wheels and wheel all over the place, or you can tilt them or whatever. This was one of the ones that only had two wheels on it. It was kind of junky, but it worked. It worked really well for just like keeping cables in and throwing them in there. And so I always had, it's just like, oh, what do you need? Do you need a speaker cable for a guitar amp? just a little short one. I have one. Do you need a long one for, an amp to go to non-powered speakers? I have one of those, and it was kind of fun over the years bringing all of this stuff to shows, and then just having somebody be like, do you have one of these? And it's like, yeah, I do, and it's fun to see some of the stuff it gets used for. Like, there's the obvious stuff like, oh, I need to change strings. Do you have a string winder? Yeah. Do you have a snip? Yeah, I got snippers, but it's fun when somebody's just like, my speaker stand, I lost the pin for it and it fell off the cable, and now I can't keep them, high in the air enough. And well, guess what? I found out at one show, it's like a screwdriver works really well for that. So I have a couple screwdrivers in my little cable bag down there, So I always try to bring stuff. I don't know what the funniest thing somebody didn't bring that I had an extra one of. There's the obvious like guitar strings and things like that. The sock for the microphone. It's basically happened. One of everything has happened that way. Having extra XLRs always helps out. If you guys are looking for something to do, or like, oh, I'm making some money, what should I do? Well, get some cables. Like that was like the first thing I did. I was so tired of just using hand-me-down cables and cables from, it's like this one works most of the time, but if you bend it or whatever, it doesn't, and I still had the remnants of some of that. Even when I started this podcast back up, if you remember the episode with Taylor Smith, the cables were like giving out in that there at certain times. So I eventually was just like, all right, XLRs all around. Here we go. I'm never going to be without one, and you got to be prepared for this stuff, and you got to bring, one of everything, and then bring a backup of everything, and then maybe find out who else is using what and bring them some backups too, because you never know when you're going to need a battery for a clip-on tuner. That's come in handy so many times. 9-volt batteries. I brought 9-volt batteries with me for forever, and I never even used them because I was never playing the acoustic, and all my pedals on my pedal board were powered by power. So there's a lot of things, and I don't know, maybe that's just me being overkill and just being a little too much. I bring extra clips for microphones because those things break. Everybody's chucked one somewhere and the thing's broken off the end, so you got to get a new clip. And guess what? I have extra ones of those. I always bring an extra couple things of everything, it seems like. But has there ever been a time where like you needed something and somebody came in clutch for you like that? This weekend was that for me. But there are times where it's like, man, this came in really handy. Like things could have been derailed had I not brought this with. So I'm really glad I did. And there's still a couple things I think my cable bag should have, like a DI box maybe. I mean, you don't need one all the time, but I'm sure there's sound guys that are just right now just like nails on a chalkboard. But yeah, I don't know. There's a few things I still need to buff up in the bag, but that's another thing though too, is like staying organized. So you got to be prepared, but you got to stay organized too. So I occasionally will go back through this cable bag and double check that I have everything in there that I need to have, and make sure that there's enough backups of things. And there's times where like sometimes I'll use something and it's like, oh, it's in a different bag right now, or it's like, oh, it's over, where I put my guitar and my amp that I use all the time. It's like it's over there in a pile on that table or something, and there's a few times where it's just like you show up to a show and it's like, oh, I'm glad we didn't need extras of these because I obviously didn't bring them. So extension cords, those have always come in handy. Power strips, those have always come in handy. So believe it or not, garbage bags have always been one that I'm sure there's somebody out there that's like, yeah, garbage bags. How many times have you played a show in the rain and you needed a garbage bag and the venue didn't have extras? Like that's happened, plenty. Or you're playing a show and it's you're out in the middle of nowhere and you're running your stuff or something. So like there's times where garbage bags have come in handy from rain or things like that, or just something to help add an extra layer of protection. So if any of these are striking a chord with you, no pun intended, I guess. Yeah, just start writing this stuff down and just bring some stuff out there. But be organized. Another one's help out. There's always ways to help out. It seems like this might sound weird, but most bands have like certain people who are those people. So it's like this person brings, the biggest setup. So they kind of just do their thing. But this person brings a whole PA system, and that person only has a microphone. So like, you find your little areas where you can kind of help out to be helpful. I've found that usually helps out quite a bit, especially working with other bands. And that could come down to too, where like you could try to organize your setup for your like PA to be as quick and easy as possible. But, not everyone's got trailers and giant racks and dedicated equipment. Sometimes things take one speaker. Sometimes it takes a speaker and a sub. Sometimes it takes, a quad set of speakers and a full monitor array. And, it just depends. So there are situations where that, would be different. But I found that like one of my favorite things to do at shows is just like, where's the heavy stuff go? And it's like, it goes over there. And it's like, all right, I'll put it in a stack here if somebody wants to wheel it. And then when they're wheeling all the stuff to where it needs to go, because half the time it has to go in a car, and I don't want to be the person accidentally breaking out a car window when I'm putting a giant speaker in there, being careless. So I'll wrap cables all day and night. And that's one of my favorite things ever, is like when the speakers are gone, the person comes back and it's like, here's all your cables. They're all done. Everything's done. It's all wrapped up. You just need to put it in a box and we're done. So like there's stuff like that where I always feel good helping out. So whatever that happens to be, whether it be, I know with like Three Finger Betty, the thing always was, like when Clint had the big drum set, it was like, you just help him bring his drum set in. I mean, I simplified my setup. It took me no time at all to set my stuff up and, help out, and do as good as you can, just hand me this thing and I'll go put it over here and you can organize. But oh man, the drummers, there's probably some drummers that are like, absolutely do not touch my stuff. But like, and I understand that too. But if there are any other drummers listening, if you made it this far, thank you. But like, how funny is it when drummers, like I'd noticed this and then recently a drummer, Scott Dahl, I was playing a show with him and he had mentioned this as like a thing, was like, if anybody ever helps, the funny thing is they always put all your drums like, here's all your drums right here. And it's like, well, that's where they need to be set up at. So you have to like move them again to get them out of the way, to put a rug down, to put them back on the rug, to set them up. It's just this funny thing. I don't know. I always thought that was kind of funny. And then a drummer, had mentioned it to me, but just helping out, another one's being on time. Just show up on time when you're supposed to be there. Jesse and I both show up pretty early to shows usually. And then unless he's like double booked or he's got something going on, or I got something going on, but we're usually pretty early to shows. And it was beneficial this last weekend to be that early because we had everything set up, and it's like, well, we just need to do a sound check, and we got like 45 minutes to an hour to do a sound check for, a Sunday gig. And it was one of those things where we used that all of those 45 minutes to an hour to, oh, my guitar doesn't work, oh, I need a sock for my microphone, everything's getting blown over. Let's lower the speaker. I mean, everything. So showing up early definitely helps out. So those were like the big items was, just being organized, helping out, being prepared. Something else that had crossed my mind when I was on my way to the gig and on my way back from the gig, and Jesse and I had kind of talked about this. And it might sound kind of weird, but like your job when you get there is to like entertain people. That's what Jesse's doing, and that's what he's bringing the party. He knows all the words. He's singing the songs. He's got the PA. I mean, like a lot of this is him. I just show up and plug in and play along. So that's why I always try to be as helpful as possible. Show up early and help him out and things like that, because I got to carry my weight somehow. One of the other things that had crossed my mind, and we had talked about this, was part of my job when I'm there to play with Jesse, and I get it. We're there to play music and have fun. That's the point, because we're there to, music is fun. That's what we're doing. But also, if somebody's paying me money, I feel like I owe it to them to A, do the best I can, but B, do well enough to try to get this person booked there again, especially if it's a first time ever, or to get them some new bookings, and that's another thing where you never know who's going to be at a show. So you always want to try to do the best. And, that's why if something bad happens, you got to try and laugh it off and just go with it. I've learned that over the years, where it's like mistakes are they're funny now, and you can just, if they see you up there having a good time, they're having a good time, so that's one of those things. I just thought about that this last weekend, and I've thought about it in the past, but it was just kind of like striking me this last weekend, where like, that is my job. My job is it's not a job, but it is, I got to be there. I got to be on time. I got to do right by this person that's agreeing to pay me money to be there, which, is the right thing to do in any situation. So, otherwise just don't agree to do it, and, so I had some learning some things to learn on this weekend. Some stuff happened, and I need to go through and fix my guitar, because I have more gigs coming up. And guess what? If I can't fix it, I need to go out and get a guitar, because my backup guitar is not one that I want to bring out almost ever. I've only brought it out a few times. It's just not my favorite to bring out and play. And it's just not ideal for that. So I need to fix it or do something. So I got some stuff to work on before the weekend comes, but the weekend is coming very quickly, especially if you're listening to this the day it comes out. And thank you guys. But yeah, doing the right things at gigs. Got to be prepared. You got to bring extra stuff. So I've got some stuff. I got to be prepared, more prepared. I usually am, but those when you think you're bulletproof, you're not. It's one of those things where you're just like, yeah, I'm never going to be that guy. No, I was that guy. So, and it's kind of bugged me ever since, and I'm recording this a few days afterwards. So, I don't know. It happened. Everything worked out. Thank you, Jesse, if I haven't said it in the podcast, but thank you for the sunscreen. Holy moly. I would have been a tomato just sitting here in front of you. I mean, I do look a little redder than normal, but yeah, so this weekend was crazy. So has any of this, I got a couple questions out of this. Does this strike true with anybody? Being prepared, showing up, being on time, treating this like a business. If not, just whatever. Fast forward 30 seconds. But has this happened to anybody? Have you forgotten something at a show? I want to hear stories of people that have forgotten stuff at shows. So if you're listening on YouTube, comment on YouTube. If that's where you're watching. Say, yeah, I forgot something. I forgot this. I forgot lights. I forgot camera, I forgot action, whatever it is, whatever you forgot to bring, just let me know in the comments. I'm sure everybody's forgot to bring something, and I didn't bring a backup guitar. I usually don't, because mine works. Well, guess what? It didn't work. And yeah, so there are times people forget to bring stuff. What have you forgotten? What have you forgotten at a show? What did somebody bail you out with once where you're just like, oh, this was much needed, and thank you. So, If you got any of those stories, drop them down below. Otherwise, I am going to keep this at a kind of a shorter rate like I did the last one. I don't want to go too long. The solo episodes are kind of boring if I'm just sitting here talking for an hour straight, off the cuff, just blathering. So let's go on to the next topic. Another thing I was going to talk about was like avoiding cliches and stereotypes in music. And I don't want to like make this anything like, obviously stereotypes are there for a reason, but they're bad for a reason as well. So, I don't want to like pigeonhole anybody into these stereotypes, because I think sometimes these stereotypes kind of build personalities out of them, which is something I'm going to get into later. But I try my best not to fall into these, where it's just like, if it's, you have to choose this side or this side, and it's only these two. And I usually don't pick a side. I'm usually just like, I see the good and the bad in both of these, but there were a few times in my life where I kind of was just like, yup. And last week on the episode with Bob Johnson, I was talking about that, how I had this like ego thing when I was younger, and I was just like, this is the correct thing, and everything else is wrong, and it's not how the world works. And it took me way too long to learn that. But I'm going to go through a few of these cliches, a few of these stereotypes, a few of these things that are, X versus Y type situations. The first one I'm going to say, and most of these are guitar related, and I know, help us out with the drum stuff. I got one drumming one in here, and we'll put it last here. But anyway, so the first one, the obvious one, the big one that everybody always kind of points to, and the one that doesn't really matter that much anymore, is Gibson versus Fender. Gibson makes the Les Paul, obviously the SG. Fender is the Telecaster and the Stratocaster. So I at first owned a Strat, a Squier Strat, a cheap one or whatever. But then my second guitar was Epiphone Les Paul, and I kind of fell in love with the Les Paul first. That was like one of the first guitars that, as I was playing it, I was just like, I like the way this feels and sounds. I would go through situations where I would play other people's instruments, and I enjoyed that, the Les Paul's sound, tone, the feel, kind of where the buttons and the knobs and everything were at on it, how everything worked. I just kind of enjoyed it more, and I subscribed more or less to that camp. And the thing though was, I was just like, man, Gibson's the best. It is the best. And then I picked up an SG. I put it on. The thing was just all neck dive, and I hated it. And there's people that play SGs that are just like, what? But I think as a kid, I was going through these things where it's just like, who plays? The reason I bought a Strat was A, it was one of the cheapest ones, and B, because it came in one of those packs, and B, I knew people that played Strats. I saw them, and it's just like, these are cool. But then it's just like, I never really bought a guitar because somebody else played it for the most part. I just bought it because I liked it. But I got the Les Paul, basically, an Epiphone Les Paul, and I was just like, I really like this. I like the way it controls. I like having the tonal options it provides. I get it, there's more tonal option probably in a Strat, but at the same time, I feel like we're arguing, Chevy versus Ford when, like, you're both driving trucks at the end of the day, right? So like, and I get it, there's Chevy and Ford guys out there that are like, no, it's not the same or whatever. But these are these cliches. I've always loved these. I always think these are funny because I guess what, I just don't really agree with anybody. I've seen people play Strats and just blow me away, and I've seen people. One of my favorites was bringing one of my instruments somewhere and having somebody else play it better, or like listening to somebody. It's like, man, this person is up there just wrecking house, and they're playing a telly, and then maybe I get the opportunity to play their instruments if it's at a jam night or something, and then guess what, the telly don't sound the same in my hands. And is it the instrument? No, it's just I'm not used to it. It's like driving someone else's car, and I don't see what the point of like arguing over which one's better or not. But another one I had was Fender versus Vox versus Marshall. And those were kind of like the three big-ish amps that were kind of like, Fender was whatever, clean. And then Vox was, I think they called it like chimey or clangy, or there's like all these funny words that musicians use to try to describe things, but had this chime to it that you just couldn't get as much out of a Fender because it was too clean. But then if you wanted to go to the next level, you went Marshall, which was kind of like a little overdrivey, if you will. But at the same time, the old Marshalls, you had to crank them up to 1 billion to get them to overdrive, and because there was no master volume for all channels, and yada yada yada. So that's a different thing. But it also does kind of come down to picking out your amps. It makes me think. I had another one down here that was distorted versus clean. Just in general, there's people that are just like, if you're playing with clean tones, it's garbage, or like, if you're playing distorted stuff, I hate it because you can't even hear what the notes are. But the funny thing is, I subscribe to both camps on that one. As far as guitar amps, I owned a Fender at first, and it was a cheap one, and it worked, and I liked it. And then I owned a very, very cheap Marshall, and it was great. I liked it. And then I owned a PV, and I liked that. And then I just I would buy and sell them, and it's just like, I get why people like these, and that's I don't know. Guitar amps were never really one that was too much. There's obvious differences where it's like, this one sounds good clean and this one does not. If you want the cleanest sound to come out of here, this one sounds obviously much more clear than that one does. But the point of this one is not to sound clear, it's to sound dark, to capture this tone that would fit well with a distorted tone, which is what this amp actually exudes in. This is the thing that this amp was made for. So sometimes it comes down to just choosing the right amp for the job. But that was one that I never really subscribed too much. Younger, I was always like, oh, distorted stuff's better, but I think we all kind of grow out of that a little bit. At least I hope we would. Using pedals versus not using pedals. I don't know. I always kind of was intrigued by guitar pedals, and I've done a large amount of both. I for a long time used my pedal board as a crutch, and then I would just eventually started going to jam nights and not bringing a pedal board because it was just easiest. I didn't need to have 10 pedals on the floor and explain to every single person what they do. And so I that's what I chose to do it that way, and that it worked for me. So I've played a lot of gigs that way as well, sometimes by choice, sometimes not by choice. But I've never really been one to just, I know when my pedals aren't there, but I don't know, it doesn't really bother me, I guess, too much if they're not. As long as there's something I can lean on a little bit, whether it be reverb or delay or chorus, or it's just something. But even if there's none of that, I don't know, just bring it like to the edge of between clean and crunch, and I'll just call it good enough. That I'm not too picky, I guess. I always just kind of liked my guitar, and my guitar sounds relatively the same on a lot of amps, which lets me know that my guitar has this tone in it that, I know what where's the tone? Is it, okay, we're going to the next one. Yes. Is the tone in the fingers, or, is it actually in the guitar? There is a lot of tone that's actually just in the fingers. I recall I've seen it a lot online, and it's Eddie Van Halen playing other people's equipment. And it's like, well, he sounds like Eddie when he plays on their stuff, regardless of whether or not it's, a Marshall or a PV or whatever. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what guitar he's playing. It's, humbucker, single coil, don't matter. He sounds like Eddie Van Halen. Guess what? If you put me on Eddie Van Halen's, if you had his full setup here, I would sound like me. It's just what's going to happen. So some of it is in the gear, some of it is in the fingers, though. You can definitely tell, like, I don't know. I can tell a little bit, but a lot of that is also in the driver's seat. If you're just like the passenger in a car, it's like, yeah, we got A to B, and you're like, no, this car feels better to drive, and it's like, I don't know that I'm in the passenger seat, So if you're just watching, you don't know, but I think it's because, the more you interact with certain things, the more you know kind of how they interact. But I don't really know. I maybe I subscribe to both camps on that one, but I do know they both have a lot of validity. So next one, covers versus originals. All right, let's start an all-out fight now in the description or in the comments. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Don't fight over this. This is not something to fight over. I played a lot of originals before I ever decided to go play covers with a cover band. And It's okay. I like both. Guess what? And I get the reason why some people would just be like, I only want to play originals. Well, but you can go play originals. Like, I only want to play covers. I don't have any inkling to write songs. Okay, cool, whatever. Do whatever you want. I get why people in one camp might be like meh at the other camp, but at the same time, I don't know. I don't really subscribe to either one of these very much at all. Like, if I don't write songs, so guess what? I'm going to play covers, but guess what? I love playing other people's originals. I don't care how. So, all these originals are basic sounding or what. I don't care. The guy wrote it. The gal wrote it. Somebody wrote this song. I'm in. It's fun. Sometimes it's fun to just try and cover somebody else's song. And that's basically all I'm doing anyways. So and so recorded this song. Well, guess what? I got to figure out how to play it and make it sound kind of like that, and then that's what I do. And whether or not somebody else wrote, I didn't write the thing, so I'm not actually writing any originals. I guess maybe I'm only playing covers. I don't know. So, but yeah, I don't know. I never really thought too much about this. In any of the bands I was in, I don't feel one way or the other. This is a fun one. Playing with feel versus shredding. There's a big argument. One of my favorite is the guys from Marvin. They've been on the podcast before. Danny and Danny. Danny Rabin is online a lot, and he plays a lot of notes when he plays, and there's people that don't view that as actual good guitar playing. And guess what? Whatever, bro. Do you even shred? I don't know. He takes all of the hate and just laughs with it, basically, because it's funny. Because I don't know, what do you think is more important, playing with feel, or is the economy of the notes, or what's the most important? I don't actually know which one would be, because there's people that can play a zillion notes and nobody knows who they are, but there's people that can't even come close to that, and everybody knows who they are. So I don't know. I don't know which one's better. I've always wanted to be able to shred, but I've always wanted to be able to play with feel, and I wish I could do both better. I don't know. I can't do either well enough to say I'm good at and the best at either one of them. But here's a fun one: acoustic versus electric guitar. There are some people that are purists that will never ever pick up an electric, and they hate them, and they yell and scream blasphemy. And I think it's funny because, like, I always think Bob Dylan, in this, because that's what happened to Bob Dylan. He played an electric guitar and everybody hated it and blah, blah, blah. And that makes me think, like, how many of these opinions and some of these things are coming from people that have zero bearing on anything that you're doing in your life? Especially, like, how many people realize, like, Bob Dylan playing electric guitar, the dumbest thing I ever heard in my entire life. And they don't even play guitar, like, why would I even... I don't know. I mean, like, yeah, you have fans, and your fans, you got to kind of listen to them or whatever, because that's where your money comes from or whatever. But yeah, I don't really know. That's a tough one. That's a tough, weird one to kind of try and swallow. I never really felt one way or the other. I always played way more electric than acoustic, but I learned on an acoustic, and I don't mind playing an acoustic. I just need to see what's wrong with mine. All right, let's see here. I only got a couple more. So, tube versus solid state, and I can throw this in here. Modelers versus real amps, and this is guitar stuff. But if you don't, I don't know. I think a lot of the opinion on a lot of this stuff comes from people that haven't utilized enough of the opposite things. So, tube versus solid state, there are situations where solid state comes in pretty handy. There are a lot of people who played guitar famously with solid state. I believe Dimebag Darrell was one of those people. He played Randall solid state amps, as far as I know. And there's a lot of people that when they tour, they will play the solid state version of whatever the tube thing is, because tubes are finicky. Sometimes you bang them around, they don't work very well, and if things get just awry enough, it breaks. But a lot of times the modelers guys catch shade because it just doesn't sound as good as a real amp, and I don't know. There are times where I say yes and times where I say no, and I think it just comes down to modeling correctly versus not correctly, and that's one of those things where I have a lot of the stuff I do. It's like I have the cheap version of this thing, so I have a cheap modeler. And what I've found is learning how to use it correctly, you can get some pretty good sounds out of it. And it's cheap. And the funny thing is, you can go online and people are like, I created this sound and I like it. You can just download it and patch it right in and you don't have to do anything. It's kind of cool. Plus, you can go places and put on headphones and play and just bring this little doodad with and plug it in and not bother anyone. Or you can play a whole show the same way with in-ear monitors, or you can not have in-ear monitors and have it come out of a wedge, or you can send it to a power amp and make noise on stage with an actual real set of speakers. I believe they now have I think Laney makes it. It's a modeling guitar amp cab. I'm gonna look it up right now, and I'm gonna guess before I look it up. I think it's 1,600 watts. It's like a full response cab or full range cab. All right, let's see what we got here. 2,600 watt. Oh, I was off by just a little bit. Holy smokes. That's insanity. But yeah, these are for full response. So that way, if you're going to have all the coloration be done digitally, you want whatever's coming out of the speakers to be as clear and crystal clear as possible. Otherwise, you have to turn off emulation of sorts. I ran into this a couple times playing with modelers and going places and seeing other people play with monitors where you kind of just talk to them about their setup and what's going on. It's oh, this person has a cab setting on and a mic setting on in their modeler, and then they send it to a clean power amp and then through a guitar cabinet, and that's getting picked up by a microphone and going to the house. And then it's that means you're being double colored by guitar cabs and double colored by the microphones. And that creates this, I always called it an underwater effect or an aqua effect. Like chorus gone awry or something. It's like you're listening when you have water in your ear and people are talking to you. It's like that, or it's something in that area. I can't describe it, but there's this thing that's just off about it. And you're oh, this is what's happening. So everything has their strengths. Everything has their weaknesses. The last one, here we go. It's for the drummers. Electric drums versus regular drums. I know there's just drummers right now that are boo. Oh, boo. Electric drums. Anybody have them and like them? That's all I want to know. Does anybody have electric drums that are, or does anybody out there have triggers set up that have MIDI capture capabilities of sorts so they can trigger things with their drum sets? I don't know. Drummers have some of the funnest equipment. Oh my gosh. There's so much stuff, but it takes forever to set up, and you can have a drum set that plays like a normal drum set, right? And then you can mic it up so you have mics on it, or you can double mic them to do other crazy stuff, or whatever you want to do. But then you can also set up triggers on them, and these triggers can do all sorts of things. They can limit the drum itself, or they can add compression, or they can have a gate of some sort to kind of make it so the drum sound only sounds like this, or they can go into MIDI and you can plug it into a computer and be I want it when I hit this thing, I want it to sound like I'm hitting a big drum like this. It's okay, here, just turn it on, and when you hit this, that's what'll come out instead. And it could be on a regular acoustic drum. I mean, I've seen people with mesh heads that do things like that and all sorts of good stuff. It's wild to think of that, but this isn't just come down to somebody with those rubber plates and hitting them and they have no response. They don't feel like real drums and only one noise comes out. This isn't just those versus a real drum set. This is all of the electronic incorporations you can have. Has anybody played with one of those electronic pads with a drum set? You have a full drum set and then you have this thing so when you hit it, it goes, hit me, or whatever, somebody soundbite that hit me and then send it over to me and we'll do something fun with it. Maybe I'll have to soundbite that. I don't know. I said this was going to be a short episode. This might be one of the funnest ones and one of the ones I feel the most passionate about. And guess what? I fit into that category of I'm not a drummer. I can play the drums. I have a drum set. But if you need anything other than 4/4 and a basic fill, I'm out. So I'm not a drummer, but I have a lot of fun opinions on this. So that's basically all I have for the episode so far this week. And I'm going to catch you guys in the outro. I want to know what you think about this, though. So if you have any staunch opinions, if you're just yes, Gibson is good, and yes, Fender is crap, I want to hear this stuff. I want to hear what you think about these. I have a pile more. I went and looked some up online. I found 35 of them. Which ones did I forget? Which ones did I leave out? Because I said this was going to be a short episode, but here we are. We're already 40-ish minutes in. So, yeah. that's all I got. Let me know what you think about all these. Is there any of these that really struck a chord? Again, no pun intended, but do you just like hate guitar pedals, or do you just like you cannot ever play a cover because you have too much pride, or which one of these have you fallen into? The only one that I think I've really fallen the furthest into was the Gibson versus Fender, when in all actuality I just preferred the way a Les Paul felt. So now most of my guitars have that kind of a feel to them. They kind of start out with the Les Paul shell. I need enough knobs to change things, and I need humbuckers and whatever it happens to be. So it's just what I got used to. But yeah, anybody, would you fall into any of these? What did you forget at a show? Let me know in the comments section. Let's all have a good laugh at each other, and I'll see you in the outro of the podcast. Oh, doggy. All right. That was a long one. I was trying my best to keep this short, and honestly, I thought about splitting this into 2 parts. I didn't know how long I'd be able to talk about all this stuff. So this is a long episode, especially compared to the last solo episode. I know the solo episodes aren't everybody's favorites. If you made it this far, thank you very much. Thank you to the Fort Dodge Fine Arts Association. Be sure to check everything out they have going on. Fort Dodge Fine Arts Association's podcast, FDT, comes out the first Friday of every month. It's Shelly Bodorf. She does all the work there. I just basically do all the editing, and I sit next to her. I'm like Andy Richter to her Conan O'Brien. I'm the person right next to her, just kind of hanging out and providing a chuckle every now and then and throwing in a story every now and then. So she does all the work. It's really great. There's lots of fun stuff, lots of fun people we've talked to so far. So check that out. I know if you're on the YouTube channel, you can find our stuff on the YouTube channel. So thank you for that. Also, thank you for listening, and check out all the Audible Farm stuff. audiblefarm.com is where it's all at. We've got the Audible Farm shop. You got all the social media. You got the Patreon channel. If you need a hat, I still have a couple hats. If you need some shirts, I still have a couple shirts. And if you don't need any of that stuff, we'll just see you next week. How about that? All right? audiblefarm.com. Peace.